So this video is about Parliament. What is it? Well, there are three branches of power. The legislature, which in the UK is Parliament, the judiciary, which is the judges, and the executive, which is the government. Now, Parliament has six functions: to pass legislation, to represent the people and their parties, to debate issues of national importance, to regulate the judiciary, which is the judges, the training ground for the government, and to legitimise the entire process. The government is held accountable to Parliament, and Parliament can dissolve government with a vote of no confidence. But since that would require a majority of votes, it's unlikely to happen since it would need members of the governing party to vote against itself. There have only been 4 government defeats since 1895, with the most recent being in 1979. Traditionally, Parliament is sovereign, which means it has ultimate law-making authority within the UK. It can legislate on any matter and cannot bind successive governments. This means that in theory, its laws can't be overturned by any higher authority, but in recent years, the rise of the EU Parliament has changed the situation, hence the rise of UKIP, etc., etc. I'll talk about that later. Within Parliament, there are 2 chambers, the House of Lords and the House of Commons. In the House of Lords, the upper chamber, sits approximately 760 peers. These peers are unelected, and the chamber is subordinate to the Commons, although this wasn't always the case. Before 1911, the Lords could block bills passed by the Commons indefinitely, but in 1911 delays were limited to a year. The Lords is best seen as a revising chamber. Peers can pass laws, add amendments, or delay laws for a year. After this year is up, the Commons can pass the law unchanged and there's nothing the Lords can do about it. There is a convention that states that Lords should pass bills that were in a government's manifesto, since these things were voted for, but since this is just a convention, there are occasions when it hasn't been observed, although fairly convincing reasons are usually given. In the House of Lords, there are hereditary peers, most of whom were abolished in 1999. These people inherited their right to sit in the House. Life peers. The Prime Minister has the right to appoint members to the upper house, meaning there are peers from political parties and cross-bench peers who aren't aligned to any party. Lords Spiritual, 2 archbishops and 24 senior bishops of the Church of England, and Lords of Appeal, senior or retired judges. There is a number of former MPs and ministers in the House as life peers. The House of Commons, the lower chamber, holds 650 members of Parliament, or MPs for short. In the chamber, which is green, whereas the Lords is red, the governing party sits on the right of the Speaker and the opposition sits on the left. More than 100 MPs hold ministerial positions, which means they take responsibility for certain areas of government policy. The opposition appoints shadow ministers to confront their rivals. Ministers and shadow ministers are frontbenchers, while the majority of MPs are backbenchers. Almost all MPs are representatives of political parties. Each party has whips, probably best conceived as enforcers, who ensure that MPs turn up to vote and follow party instructions. They enforce party discipline either by inducements or by threats. A manifesto is a long document that details a political party's plans for if they get into government. The idea is, when we vote, we are agreeing to everything that's written in it, which is why it's so important to know what we're voting for. The Speaker of the Commons presides over debates and maintains order. He or she is a senior MP elected by the other MPs in a secret ballot. He or she must be neutral despite party allegiances. Way back in the day, the monarchy had a prominent role in Parliament, but now it's been reduced to a formal and ceremonial position. The Queen is head of state, but many of the powers associated with her position are actually exercised by the government. The monarch's role now is royal assent. Only when a bill has been signed by the Queen can it become law. Appointing the Prime Minister. This is purely a formality. I'm not quite sure what would happen if the Queen refused to appoint the leader of the largest party. The Prime Minister must ask the monarch for permission to dissolve Parliament and call a general election. Again, I'm not quite sure what would happen if she said no. And finally, the monarch gets to give a speech. At the state opening of Parliament once a year, the monarch opens the new parliamentary session with a speech written by the Prime Minister outlining the agenda for the year. So Parliament is made up of the Commons, the Lords and the monarchy. So now we know what it is, but how does it work? Take a look at the next video.